In today's video, I'm going to show you my best way of using flash lighting that I've used to take macro photos just like these. A flash is a hugely powerful tool in any part of photography, but especially in macro when you're so often photographing tiny, fast-moving subjects, often in maybe dark conditions underneath bushes or in the deep forest. And while it is easy to get a flash gun like this one, pop it on your camera, point it forwards and start firing away, you'll actually get your best results if you take it off camera. So let's take a look at what that actually means and, crucially, how to do it. So let's take this little macro scene here as an example. I've got a little owl as a stand-in for, let's pretend, a mushroom. And I'll start by popping the flash on camera and pointing it forwards. The light is directly pointing at our subject. I'm just going to take a quick shot. And I can see that this is a very harsh looking image. That's because that light is coming from the position of the camera. It's going straight forwards at the subject. It's direct lighting. And what it does is eliminate all of those shadows. So what we get is an image with no real form or dimension. It's just light hitting it in the face. Often when photographers that shoot portraits say that they don't like the flash look, this is what they mean, that direct light going straight forwards and hitting their subject and lighting up all of their face. But good portrait photographers will know that that isn't the best way to light a subject. And I actually like to approach my macro photography in a similar way that I would portraits, because I don't want that harsh hit in the face flash look. Instead, I want to work with that light, finding ways that I can put it from a different angle that allows not only good light coming in, but good shadows to form as well. Shadows that bring out the shape and form of the subject, and hopefully create a shot that looks a little bit more artistic and considered, rather than just flat lighting as though it's a scientific record for a textbook. Look at these self-portraits. This one is done with direct on-camera lighting, whereas this one, I've moved the same flash only a couple of feet to the left of the camera. It's an absolutely immense difference, and it can transform your shot. So let's go back to our macro scene here, because we've already seen what it looks like with the flash hitting the subject in the face. So let's try bringing it off camera and moving it around. So instead of the flash being here, I'm just going to bring it around here, the same distance away, but at a slightly different angle. And I take the same shot. And it's such a tiny movement with the flash, just from here to here, but it has absolutely transformed the look of our image. And we could move it even further. I could bring it right off to the side over here for a much more dramatic, moody side light. Maybe even bring it behind our subject, just to give a nice subtle edge light that just carves out the actual shape. When your light is off camera, you can start thinking about lighting in 360 degrees. It's not just on your camera. Your light can be in front, it can be behind your subject, it could be left or right, it could be above, it could be firing up from below. And every different angle will give you a different look in your image. And that makes it incredibly fun to experiment with, because it allows for so much more creativity. So now we know why you might want to take your light off your camera. Let's actually talk about how you can do it. Well, crucially, you need to find a way to make your camera communicate with your light so that when you take a photo, that light will fire. Now, some flashes, like the Godox ones that I mostly use, this is the AD100, I also use the AD200, they have a lot of wireless functionality built in, and they communicate with Godox's own wireless triggers. Now, the trigger sits on top of the camera and communicates with the lights. I can pair multiple lights with the one trigger, so I can create more dynamic multi-light setups, so when I fire the camera button, all of those lights go off. And most modern flashes do have some kind of wireless capability built in, but almost all of them will require some kind of on-camera trigger, so it is just worth Googling the brand of light that you're either currently using or that you're wanting to use, and making sure that you've got all the bits you need so that your camera can communicate with the light that you want. Because while I can pair various different Godox lights with a Godox trigger, I cannot pair a Canon speed light with my Godox trigger, or a Profoto light with a Godox trigger. So you do have to kind of buy within one system. And you can also just get generic wireless flash triggers like these things. One of them would sit on your light, the other one on your camera. And that can be handy if you've got older flash guns that maybe don't have wireless functionality built in, because you can just add these and for the most part they should work well. That said, I bought some really cheap ones and I found that they frequently just stopped working. As a result, I haven't taken these out of the cupboard in about 5 years. But the cheapest way, if you don't want to have to shell out on all kinds of wireless triggers and things, is simply to get an off-camera shoe cord like this one. Now, this is literally just a cable that on one end sits on the hot shoe of your camera and the other one sits on the connector on your flash and just allows them to talk to each other. So I can just move it around and flash away. I think this one was only about £20 on Amazon. It's really, really long though, so there's a lot of spare cable going on, but you can get much shorter ones, which is ideal for macro because usually you're not moving your flash that far away. But wireless is certainly the most convenient, and it is why for the most part I always use Godox's lights and the triggers when I shoot macro. Okay, so let's talk about camera settings when you're using flash. Well, this is where things can get very complicated, so just to keep things more straightforward, I'm going to talk about the settings that I use. Now, I always use my camera and my flash in manual mode. On my camera, my ISO, I will always start with the lowest point, that's ISO 100, and my aperture set to around f8 for sharpness. But my shutter speed depends. If I want to cancel out all of the ambient light and have a black background that allows my subject to really stand out, like in these images, then I will use a faster shutter speed of about 200th of a second. If I want to bring in more of that ambient light to allow the scene to look a little bit more natural, then I will use a slower shutter speed. Bear in mind that the shutter speed does not affect the power of your flash. To change the power of your flash, you either need to change your aperture, selecting a wider open aperture to let more light into the camera, or if you want to darken it down, then you will select a narrower aperture that restricts the light coming in. Or you change the power on your flash. Now, often people will get started working with flash in what's called ETTL mode. Now that stands for exposure through the lens. And that literally just means that the exposure of the flash is being determined by what the camera is seeing through its lens. And that can work fine if your flash is on camera where your camera expects it to be. But when you take it off camera, suddenly it doesn't really know whereabouts that flash is, and you're not going to get the same results. But why not? Well, another way to adjust the effective power of your flash is to move it either closer in or farther away from your subject. So take this LED light panel as an example. If I hold it far away from my hand, then we can probably see that my hand isn't being lit very much. As I bring it closer, suddenly that light on my hand becomes a lot stronger. But because neither the camera nor the flash know exactly where the flash is being held relative to your subject, ETTL isn't able to make the right decisions about what power to use. So that's why manual mode on the flash is typically best and is what I use all the time when I'm working with flash. Now, most flashes, whether it's a flash gun like this or a unit like this, tend to start at 1/1 or full power. Then they'll drop down to half power, quarter power, an eighth power, 16th, 32, and so on. I often use a 16th or 32 as a good starting point, take a test shot, and then I adjust from there. If it's a bright sunny day, then I'll probably need to increase that flash power. But if it's a night, or if it's overcast, or if I'm shooting deep in the forest and not a lot of sunlight is getting through, then I can probably use a much lower flash power. But this is usually a very trial and error process, so I will start by taking a shot, looking at my image, trying to work out what that flash is doing, and then I'll adjust from there. If it needs to go brighter, I'll take it up a couple of notches, try again, and then keep on adjusting. And on most of my photos, I've usually taken numerous shots just to kind of get that balance right before I then take the actual shot that I really want. But the effective power of your light will also be affected by any modifiers you might have put on, including mini softboxes or MagMog modifiers. It also changes depending on whether you're bouncing the light or firing it directly, and I'll talk all about this in another video. But the process is still the same. If you've got a modifier on, you'll take a test shot at maybe a 16th power, see what your photo looks like, and adjust from there. Working with Flash can often seem really daunting, but it is so worth getting to grips with because it opens up so many creative possibilities. But remember that it's not the only way to do things, it's not the best way. There is no right or wrong. Most macro photographers swear by having the light on their camera and firing it into one of those white cones. Now that casts a very even light all around the subject. And that's great, you get light everywhere, everything looks nicely exposed. But for me personally, I like to play with shadow a little bit more. I don't want everything to be nice and evenly lit. I want to create some of that mood and drama. As I say, I like to approach some of my macro photos as I would a portrait. And the goal of most portrait photography is not just to throw light everywhere you can, it's about how you control that light and actually carve out the form of your subject. My way is not better, it's just personally what I like to do. But I hope this video has been helpful to give a bit of an introduction into using your Flash off camera. Certainly if you've been working with light already, but you've only ever had that light on camera, I encourage you as strongly as possible to at least give it a try, taking it off camera, moving it around and seeing what results you can get. This video has been something of an introduction to that. It is far from exhaustive. There are a lot of things that I haven't touched on. If I had, we'd have been here all day. But I hope I've given enough information so that you can maybe see the benefits of off-camera Flash and maybe how to get started yourself. As always, links to the equipment that I use, including the Godox lights and triggers, will be in the description of this video. And if you've got any more questions or comments on this, then do please head into the comments section below. I will try and answer what I can, but there's usually quite a nice community hanging out in the comments who will help each other with tips and tricks. So if you've got any of your own tricks, do please feel free to share them. But that brings me to an end of this video. If you have enjoyed it, please do hit that like button and of course consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.